The proposed tax reform bill 2024, the presidency has now confirmed that President Bola Tinubu has received the National Economic Council's recommendation that the tax reform bills already sent to the National Assembly be withdrawn for further consultation. A press statement signed by Special Advisor to the President on Information and Strategy, Bayo Onanuga, says President Tinubu commends the National Economic Council members, especially Vice President Kashim Shettima and the 36 state governors for their advice, but believes that the legislative process, which has already begun, provides an opportunity for inputs and necessary changes without necessarily withdrawing the bills from the National Assembly. He urged the NEC to allow the process to take its full course and welcomes further consultations and engagement with key stakeholders to address any reservations about the bills while the National Assembly considers them for passage. Mr. Onanuga says when President Tinubu set up the Presidential Committee on Tax and Fiscal Policy Reform in August 2023, he had only one objective, which is to reposition the economy for better productivity and efficiency and make the operating environment for investment and businesses more conducive. This objective, according to him, remains more critical even today than before. However, recall that yesterday the presidency released an explainer on the proposed tax reform bills. Special Advisor to the Presidency on Media and Strategy, Bayo Onanuga, in the release did explain that the bill is not against the North. Rather, it will benefit all states. The explainer is coming on the heels of the position of governors of 19 northern states of Nigeria who met on Monday to express their disapproval of the bill. He said these reforms emerged after an extensive review of existing tax laws, adding that the tax bill aims to eliminate unintended multiple taxation and make Nigeria's economy more competitive by simplifying tax obligations for businesses and individuals across board. Joining me on the program tonight for more insight on this development is the Director and Chief Executive Officer, Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise, Muda Yusuf. Dr. Yusuf, thank you for joining us on the program this evening.
Thank you very much for having me. Indeed,
it does seem the presidency has chosen to go ahead with these bills, asking NEC to go through the legislative process and suggesting that inputs can be made at public hearing. Sounds like a smart move, right?
Well, I think the process is essentially the same, because what the National Economic Council was talking about was the need for broader consultation, so that you have a process that is very inclusive. Now, the fact that the bills are already in the National Assembly, of course, the National Assembly is also a platform for consultation, because there will be input, there will be public hearing from all the critical stakeholders, including those who have reservations about the bill. So I agree with what the President has said. Rather than truncate the entire legislative process by withdrawing it, since the argument was about consultation, the consultation can still take place at the level of the National Assembly. Because the issues that were raised, particularly by the Northern Governors Forum, was just about a small section of the bill. And don't forget, we have about 4 bills together.
Indeed.
You have the Joint Revenue Board bill, you have the Nigerian Revenue Service bill, you have the Nigerian Tax Administration bill, and we have the Nigerian Tax bill. So it's quite a bulky document. So we cannot say because of one small provision, which has to do with the derivation principle around the VAT, we now truncate the entire process. I don't think that will also be proper. So, and in any case, the point that was also being made about the VAT distribution, the reality is that what the reform is even proposing is much better for the states, because the current situation is that 15% of the VAT revenue is going to the federal government.
Perhaps, Dr. Yusuf,
is going to the states.
We should rather begin by understanding what has now become the most controversial part of this bill, which has indeed been the proposed derivation-based VAT distribution model, which the northern governors opposed to on Monday. Let's help us understand this provision, like you're talking to a nursery school student.
No, the point is that under the current arrangement, 15% is going to the federal government, 50% is going to the states, and 35% is going to the local governments. What the bill is proposing is an even a higher percentage going to the states. The bill is reducing the allocation to the federal to 10% from 15%, and it's increasing the allocation to states from 50% to 55%, which is an advantage for the states. So the controversial or the contentious issue now is a clause that is in the new bill that 60% of the states and local government allocation shall be based on derivation. You can have conversation around that. Because currently, I think the derivation component, I don't think it's more than maybe 20%. Now that it has been increased to 60%. So if some sections of the country feel that this will be to their disadvantage, we can have a conversation around that. You know, if we want to retain the status quo, we can do that. So that we don't because of this small provision, now, you know, disrupt the whole process. We are talking about 4 major bills that are already before the National Assembly. So we can have a review about that and possibly even go back to status quo. Because there are also some sections of the bill, if it is too politically sensitive, in order not to impede the progress of the reform, we stay away from that and we move on. Because there are larger issues in the bill. You have the economic development incentive provision, which is supposed to give concessions for purposes of economic development. That is for the private sector. We have a provision in the bill to even support the capacity of the states to be able to generate their own revenue. Because not all the states have the capacity to manage their tax administration. So there are quite a number of good things in the bill. So we need to be careful so that we don't throw away the baby with the bathwater.
So the proposal is to allocate more VAT revenues to states, like you've explained, while allowing states where the VATs are generated to get the lion's share. We're going to talk more about this and how you think it affects northern leaders. But that will be after this break. Stay with us, everyone. Dr. Muda Yusuf is the Director and Chief Executive Officer, Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise. He joins me on the show to discuss the President Tinubu tax reform bills. Thank you for staying the course on the program. You identified earlier that this proposal is to allocate more VAT revenues to states while allowing states where the VATs are generated to get the lion's share. It is that latter position that northern governors believe would not favor states in the region. How really do you think they are at a disadvantage here?
No, you see, the worry about the Northern Governors Forum is understandable. Because if there is too strong a component of derivation in the VAT distribution, of course, they will be at a disadvantage. Because there are more economic activities taking place in the southern part of the country than in the northern part of the country. Whether we are talking about areas from which the VATs were generated, or areas in which they were collected, or areas in which those activities were consumed or purchased, whichever way we look at it. Because of the economic development variabilities across the country. I mean, the purchasing power in the north, you can't compare to the purchasing power in most of the southern parts of the country. So when you talk about derivation based on where the products are consumed, of course, they will be at a disadvantage. So that is why I'm saying that that particular provision is a politically sensitive one. So if we can find a way around it, or even allow the status quo to remain, so that you can move ahead with some of the other major reforms that are positive for the economy.
I'm sure you read Mr. Bayo Onanuga's explainer yesterday night. I'm wondering what he meant by saying that this new tax model is designed to create an even fairer system. He talked about the fact that states in the northern region that produce the food we eat should not lose out just because their products are VAT exempt or consumed in other states.
Yeah, these are some of the arguments. But what is important is that if you look at the principle of derivation around VAT, clearly the northern parts of the country are not as strong, are not in a much better position in terms of benefiting from it compared to what we have in the south. Because we are talking about the pace of economic development, we are talking about purchasing power, we are talking about income per capita. There are variations geographically across the country, and we need to reckon with that. That is why even in tax allocation, in revenue allocation, there's a component of it that has to do with equality of states, just to be equitable, so that states that are less developed are supported by states that are much more developed. It's just to be equitable. So for me, we should not allow this provision, to truncate the entire reform process.
Talking about
we can allow the status quo to remain.
Yes.
While we move on with other components of the reform.
Exactly what the presidency is saying, that the ongoing tax reform is seeking to correct the inherent inequality in the current derivation model as a basis for distributing VAT revenue. So what we are going to see, if this scales through, is a revenue distribution that considers the place of supply or consumption of relevant goods and services. But I'd like you to talk to us about government's effort to indeed overhaul the entire country's tax system. What do you make of the attempt, for instance, to create a central revenue service that will collect all government revenues, including those currently being collected by agencies like Customs and Ports Authority?
Well, I have gone through those bills, possibly not in too much details. I didn't find anywhere where it is expressly stated that the new Revenue Service Board or new Nigerian Revenue Service will take over the functions of collection currently being undertaken by Customs, NIMASA. Because if you talk about government revenue, close to 30 or more government agencies are collecting revenue. So what capacity will the Revenue Service have to be collecting revenue across all these other agencies? And to collect revenue in some of these agencies, you require some skill sets, you require some competencies, because you need to invoice people. If you are invoicing people in, say, civil aviation, for instance, you must have knowledge about the aviation business. If you are invoicing people or taxing people in NIMASA, you must have to have some knowledge about maritime. If you are taxing people or imposing import duty in the customs, you must have knowledge about customs duty administration, about valuation, about HS codes. So how are you going to manage all of that? So we also need to be careful not to introduce too much complications in the process of this reform. And I think that is what this public hearing in the National Assembly will address. But my understanding is that all these revenues will flow directly. We are in an age of technology. You don't need to go and sit down in the port before you can collect the revenue. Those who are paying the revenue can pay directly online to whatever account that is designated. Something similar to what you have with the TSA. So we need to improve the framework of the TSA to take account of what is being proposed. I think that will be enough, rather than dismantle all these other structures, substitute it with another one, and I mean that would be too complicated. But that, in my view, is not the contemplation of that section of the reform. I don't think so.
All right. What do you make of concerns about this proposed bill increasing the number of taxes currently in operation? Already the presidency is saying that's not the case, that they are designed to optimize and simplify existing tax frameworks. But we're also hearing thoughts along the line of food produced in the north, which are currently exempted from value-added tax.
Yes, I mean, the whole principle is about simplification of taxes. It's about reducing the pressure of tax on businesses. There's a whole section in the bill, one of the bills, that speaks about economic development tax incentives. You know, this is specifically for sectors of the economy that are contributing to economic development. And that is going to come with some concessions. Then, of course, a lot of exemptions of VAT for some critical products that the people consume. Some of them are already under exemption. I think more are being added, you know, to reduce the pressure of prices on the citizens. So these are some positive elements, you know, that are contained in the bill.
But are you optimistic that this indeed will not increase the amount that Nigerians pay as tax?
No. I don't think so. I think the whole objective is to moderate the pressure of taxation, to reduce the number of taxes, to rationalize the number of taxes. Because I need to be frank with you, this is not the time to be raising taxes. Because the businesses are already overstretched, the citizens are not finding it easy. So if you have anything now, we should be talking about tax concessions. Not beyond that, not even now. So for now, I think it's better to have a pause on anything that has to do with increases in tax. Of course, there's a provision about the progressive nature of income tax. That is targeting those who are high-end earners. Maybe that can go. But in terms of general taxation regime, either for businesses or for individuals, this is not a good time to increase any tax at all.
Absolutely. I'm sure majority of Nigerians would agree with you. We have to go now, but very quickly, another assurance coming from the presidency is the fact that these bills do not intend to eliminate the duties of any existing agency, department, or ministry of government. Instead, it is to harmonize revenue collection, like you mentioned, and its administration across the Federation. How much of assurance do you think that would mean for stakeholders as they continue to deliberate on this bill?
No, I think that will bring relief to some key agencies of government, because some people have been saying that, well, the new revenue service is going to take over the functions of customs, take over the function of NIMASA, take over the functions of SCA and all of that. Of course, that is not practical. I think it's all about ensuring that we minimize leakages and ensuring that we have a clearer picture about how much revenue is coming into government coffers. And we have technology to deal with all of that. We don't need to be dismantling structures and be moving people around. I mean, with the aid of technology, we should have minimum disruption, you know, to the operations of all of these agencies.
Well, one thing is certain, these 4 bills will not be like the others we've seen in the 10th National Assembly. This will undergo some comprehensive scrutiny, seeing the interest shown by major stakeholders over the days, over the week in this regard. Director, Chief Executive Officer, Center for Promotion of Private Enterprise, Dr. Muda Yusuf, thank you for talking to us.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
That's our program for this week. Thanks for being a part of it. Remember, you can watch this edition later tonight at midnight and at 6 a.m. tomorrow. I am Nifemi Oguntoye.